Cordial welcome to my Digitalization and Literature MA course. I'm Zsolt Almási, Associate Professor at Péter Pázmány Catholic University. In this introductory video, I'm going to explore two themes. First, I'm going to give an overview of the entire course, provide an explanation to some of the assumptions that lead and motivate the entire course and meditation on the one hand, and on the other hand I'm going to talk about an emerging scholarly field called digital humanities. Let us start with an overview about the whole series of lectures and the course. Literature and literary works do not exist really as Plato's ideas. Every literary work arrives at us through some kind of a mediation, a means through which we can get acquainted, encounter the literary work. These may be, in the case of Shakespeare, I'm a Shakespeare scholar, so let me give an example from Shakespeare. That is, Much Ado About Nothing or Hamlet does not exist as such. They only exist in a way that they might reach us through a theatrical performance, for example, a film adaptation, a book, and a digital text. Now, all these media present the literary work in a different manner from each other. It's quite different to look at a performance where we have flesh and bone, real actors, living people acting out the roles for us, or reading a book where we can turn the page back and we have and there is a kind of a structure of the page itself, the way we can proceed in the book. We can always turn back the pages if we want to check or recheck something, whereas if it's a theatrical performance, we do not have time to stop, do not have the means to stop the performance itself. We cannot shout to the stage that right now stop and start the presentation anew. So we have different media presenting literary works to us. Literary works reach us through different media, and then we need different strategies, vocabularies, concepts, for the sake of understanding, making sense of what we see, what we read, what we watch. Now, traditionally speaking, literary works, for example, Shakespearean dramatic works, reached us through the book, theater, or movie theaters. Nowadays, however, from the 1980s onwards, however, there is a very strong movement and appearance to a movement towards a new medium, and that is the digital world. And the digital arena, cyberspace, is another medium through which literary works reach us, and consequently we need different strategies to make sense of what reaches us through the medium of the digital. The movement from the analog to the digital is called digitalization. For example, digitalization involves a variety of aspects of our lives. Digitalization means that when I was young and wanted to do something with my bank account, I had to go to the bank. Okay, that is the analog methodology. I put on my shoes, take the car, get to the bank to make arrangement with respect to the money, transfer some money to another bank account, whatever. Or where in the analog world, when I wanted to buy um, laptop, I had to, or a radio, whatever, I had to go to the shop and buy there. Nowadays, the world has changed. Digitalization means that we can do all these and the variety of aspects of our lives we can do through the digital. I don't go to the bank, but open my bank account via the internet. I can buy a radio, a laptop from a web shop, which and this is called digitalization. And this digitalization, in a sense, reorganized our lives when we experience time and space differently. When I wanted to buy an exercise book or a notebook, I had to go to the stationery. So I had to dress up, leave the house, get public transport, spend time traveling to the stationaries. Whereas nowadays, I watch a movie and then it occurs to me that okay, I need a notebook next week, so I stop watching the movie on the screen of my laptop, open a web browser, go to a web shop, buy the notebook, and it will be delivered to me later on. So my experiencing of shopping in terms of time has changed. Also in space, I don't travel. I can buy a notebook from the US, from China, from Germany, wherever, just from my desk through a web browser, through the internet. This is digitalization. One part of digitalization is digitization, which means that the analog is turned into digits. For example, when we scan a book into a PDF file and create a PDF file with a scanner and a computer, then we digitize the analog. That is, we turn the physical, the analog, into numbers, really, ones and zeros ultimately, or even more ultimately, if one can say so, into the presence or absence of electronic signs. That is digitization. Digitalization is a more complex phenomenon. The cultural movement from the analog to the digital, creating new strategies, and also while digitization means just the physical act of turning a physical into a digital object. Now, what happens in our life, generally speaking, happens with respect to literature as well. So this is what we're going to deal with in this course, how literature moves onto the digital realm. I'm going to talk about databases, database studies, databases and the parts of databases like the front end and the back end. Also, I'm going to talk about the internet as a kind of a circumstance, a context in which we encounter digital databases. I'm going to compare the digital to book culture, whether we can talk about the materiality of a digital database or not. I just tell you in advance that yes, we can talk about that. Also, when we talk about digital databases, we also should be aware of whether we can access the database at all or not. That is, whether we have to pay for it or it is an open access. What is the difference, for example, between a free application and an open access one? So I'm going to talk about the history and the trend and the movement of the history of the movement of the open access, open hardware, open source movements. So this is general. Also, I'm going to talk about types of files that are necessary or used when building a digital database. I'm going to talk about also metadata, what metadata means, and why metadata matter for a digital database, plus what kind of standards there are with respect to metadata. So this is going to be a rather complex, long introduction into the digitalization of literature, the relationship between digitalization and literature. Now, a related field or a field that deals with these questions, an emerging field, is called digital humanities. So in the rest of the lecture, I'm going to talk about digital humanities. Let us start with the question, why to talk about digital humanities at all? Mark Sempler, in his blog, Mark Sempler is a digital humanist, and in his blog he wrote about and he's also a historian of literature. He visualized the presence of digital humanities at the annual MLA, Modern Language Association conference. And what we can see on this is that MLA is a really large, I'm sorry to butt into my own speech, but we have to know that the MLA conference is a really huge conference for all people dealing with or being associated with the Modern Language Association, literature people, linguists, whoever. And when Mark Sempler created this diagram about the presence of digital humanities at the annual MLA conferences, we can see that there is a kind of a growth until 2014, gradual growth. We can see with blue that is the number of DH sessions. The next to it, the gray column represents all the rest of all the sessions. So we can measure one against the other. And we can see a steady growth until 2014. And also the blue line represents the percentage of the digital humanities sessions compared to all the sessions at the relevant MLA conference sessions. Now, what he claims is that in the first half of the 21st decade, first half, so in the 21st century until 2014, the first 1.5 decades of the 21st century, we can see this growth, which means that more and more sessions were dedicated to the questions, to the problems of digital humanities. And he says that we can see a kind of a decline from 2015, but this decline doesn't mean that people lost interest in digital humanities. But from 2015, although the number of sessions dedicated exclusively to problematic questions, problems, theories of digital humanities decreased, yet when checking out the rest of the sessions, one can witness an exponential growth in terms of papers that are not dedicated to digital humanities, but to, for example, literary works and cultural studies, with the means, with the applications that were developed, used, theorized by digital humanists. So the decline in 2015 doesn't mean that digital humanities lost its power in 2015. But what it means is that digital humanities infiltrated all the field of traditional literary, cultural, linguistic studies. Now, the growth was seen by a variety of people. For example, one of the big dogs in literary criticism, in literary theory, is Stanley Fish. Stanley Fish is a person who is always there to engage in discussions, debates over topics related to, in a most general sense, to literary studies. Now, Stanley Fish published a series of sort of blog posts in the New York Times within the opinionator part at the end of 2011 and the beginning of 2012. Now, in these blog posts, Stanley Fish attacked digital humanities, which means that by 2011, according to Stanley Fish, digital humanities had become so powerful that it was worth talking about it and it was worth attacking it. Stanley Fish also started out with the exploration of the 2012 MLA Congress conference program. And he could see the increase of papers dedicated directly or indirectly to digital humanities. Now, in his attack against digital humanities, he called digital humanities the next big thing. He says that he claimed that after the death of the great literary theories or the debates concerning literary theories, literature people seemingly needed a new fashionable approach to literary studies, and that is digital, and they found this in digital humanities. He says that this is the next big thing because this is fashionable, very interesting at the moment, but actually it offers nothing in reality. So it's going to be as empty as anything that can be useless in literary studies. He says that the problem with digital humanities is that, okay, there is something interesting in this. Stylistic, authorship studies, collaboration, stuff that was either alien to literary scholars, for example, collaboration. Literary scholars are most of the time solo heroes. But also, he says that the real problem is that digital humanities by 2011, judging from the program of the next MLA conference, has become so powerful that digital humanities is going to occupy all English departments, so literature departments, cultural departments, and that they are going to dominate, extract all the money from the possible funds, and traditional scholars will not have the appropriate funding for doing their research. And also, he says in these blog posts that it's not the other problem with digital humanities, counting words, stylistics, is that the machine, the computer, cannot take meaning into account. I mean, this is 2011, so I mean 9 years ago. The scenario has changed a little bit. Maybe I'm going to talk about this later on. But in 2011, meaning escaped the attention of stylistic studies. This means that, for example, the machine takes a word by its meaning that is fixed in a dictionary, and it cannot observe and account for uses of words in an ironic, sarcastic, say, metaphorical manner. It is only the string of letters that is seen by the computer. The meaning it does not form an aspect of the strategy used by computer-assisted stylistics. And if meaning is not part of the exploration, then it's actually useless or even misleading. And there is much truth in what he says, so it's no question that Stanley Fish is clever and good at what he's doing. Nevertheless, of course, his attack was not that is not really founded on scholarly principles. It's a blog post, opinionator. He at one point also admits that he's doing what digital humanists were doing, that is, writing up blog posts. And of course, in New York Times, in the opinionator, you have to have very strong opinions that might lead to arguments. So the genre itself already determines the way Stanley Fish had to speak about digital humanities. But what I would like to emphasize now is that digital humanities seemingly became so important in 2011 that it was worth attacking it, because it generated a really beautiful debate concerning digital humanities. Now, so there is this problematics around digital humanities, resistance towards digital humanities in the first decade or in the first and half decades of the 21st century. But it's quite interesting that what digital humanities do nowadays has a much longer history than the 21st century. The story began as early as 1949. I guess this is an interesting date. This is the time when a Jesuit priest was very much interested in the works of Saint Thomas of Aquinas, thought that it would be beneficial for um, uh, for uh, for exploring the works of St. Thomas of Aquinas with the help of the computer. This is a huge over half. I mean, it's dozen volumes, thick volumes that Thomas of Aquinas created during his actually not so long career as an author. So Roberto Busa, an Italian Jesuit priest, thought that an index, a word list, would help the analysis of Thomas's works, and realized that creating an index would be all too laborious manually and would be less accurate. So the newly invented computer back then, one computer knowing much less than our smartphones now, they filled a complete building, or at least holes within a building. So the Jesuits did not have a computer, which was absolutely expensive, so it was not just going to the first digital shop and you could buy a laptop. He had to team up with somebody who, or at least a corporation, which had a computer and which had the staff for creating the Index Mysticus. So Roberto Busa, his Jesuit priest, teamed up with IBM, and he created with these punch cards 11 million lemmatized words. Lemmatized words mean that it's not the actual use of each and every word was there in this Index Thomisticus, but only the forms of the words that are in the dictionary. So the infinitive without to, and the singular words. So 11 million lemmatized words found their way through punch cards into the Index Thomisticus. Now, of course, from the present day perspective, one might say that this is less laborious, but actually it was as laborious as doing it with the hand, and also punch cards were not. Nowadays cannot be used, but it was very interesting. Roberto Busa traveled around the world explaining the results that he could achieve with IBM. For example, in the early 1980s, Roberto Busa gave a lecture in Hungary at the University of Debrecen. Okay, so from the perspective of the present day, Roberto Busa's achievement maybe not so great, but back in his time it was revelatory, and centers were opened around the world, dealing with using roughly the same technology for literary philosophical sense. This is how humanities computing came into being. Centers were established around the world, from Cambridge, UK, to Tübingen, Germany. The characteristic features of this period, so between 1949 and 1970, are the following. Technology was very complicated and complex. So from the present day perspective, these were really, really time and money consuming activities. And the other achievement of this period is the automatic recognition and creation of lemmatized words. So teaching the computer to recognize eat, even it is spelled with ATE or EATS. So although what was at stake were strings of letters, yet from the string of letters the computer could arrive at a higher level of abstraction, that is, lemmatization. Now the achievement of this period went over to the creation of dictionary projects. One of the most well-known was the so-called TLG, that is the Thesaurus Linguae Graecae, which contained 70 million words, Greek words, and this was a very interesting and useful dictionary. I myself had a copy of Thesaurus Linguae Graecae. That is, I had access to it via a CD-ROM, so this is the next generation TLG. And what you could do with this is searching for words in the entire ancient Greek literary philosophical sources. When back in the 90s, at the end of the 90s, I was writing a paper, university paper for a course about the word method in Greek philosophy. I could make use of TLG very easily because I just typed in methodos and it gave me all the instances where and how the word was used in ancient Greek philosophy and literature. Now that is a bit of an achievement because I just wouldn't be able to read through this really huge corpus. But with the help of TLG, it was a matter of moments to create a list of a reading list where it was worth exploring the meanings and the math and the usage of the word methodos. So this is the time of the creation of dictionaries, indices, and which concerned words in huge corpuses on the one hand, in huge corpora on the one hand, and also this is the period when the power of the computer was utilized to help scholarship with identifying loci in these huge oeuvres. Now, from the 1980s to the 1990s, the great discoveries that again fostered the cause of humanities computing were the novelties of the PC. That is that it was not impossible to get access to the power of the computers because personal computers were available from the 80s onwards. The winners of the competition were the IBM PC, or the PC as we nowadays call them, and the Apple Macintosh, the Apple computers as nowadays we know them. This is the time of the creation of a means of communication between, I mean, human beings, but from the present perspective, scholars, was the invention of the electronic mail system, that is the email, which is so customary today, but it was not so all the time. So scholars had to discover the advantages of fast exchange of information through emailing each other. This is the time, this decade until the 90s. This is the decade when more and more elaborate text analysis tools were created, which were based on the DOS language. The word cruncher is a text analysis tool. There are millions of updates that is still available nowadays. Another exemplary project was the creation of the Beowulf workstation, the Beowulf project by Patrick Connor, where different versions of Beowulf could be seen and analyzed next to each other. Now, this is also the time when the concept and the software for list servers were created. That is, when people did not have to put all the names into the address bar of an email, but could send emails to dozens, hundreds, and even thousands of people through the application of list servers. From our perspective and from the perspective of digital humanities, the 7th of May in 1987 is an exceptionally interesting date, because this is the time when Willard McCarthy started experimenting with list servers. He discovered it for himself and tried to put it into use. And this is the date when the humanist list was created. The humanist email, a circular email, is still in existence nowadays. Willard McCarthy still is the host of the humanist list server, where anyone who has joined the humanist list server can post, send an email, discussions, theoretical, pragmatic, come into being, and nowadays there are thousands of users. And if you want to be updated with respect to what is going on in digital humanities computing all over the world instantaneously, then joining the humanist listserv is just a phenomenal thing and a must, really. Willard McCarthy, partly because of the humanist listserv, received, it was knighted by the Queen because of the cultural impact the humanist listserv created. Now the 90s again mark a very important period in the evolution or coming into being of humanities computing, which will be labeled as or named as or baptized as digital humanities. 1993 is a very important year in terms of accessibility, because this is the time when the Mosaic web browser, I was in May actually, Mosaic web browser, a web browser became a commercial software, which means that from this time on, people could easily go onto the World Wide Web and search over there or just browse over there. Before that, it was a really complicated activity. But from that time on, from 1993, everyday people without much education in information technology could use the World Wide Web efficiently and easily. This is the time of the creation of the hypertext markup language, which is the HTML, which is going to be, roughly speaking, I'm going to talk about this later in more detail, but the language, the visual language of the World Wide Web. This is the time when publications appear in digital format. Archives are created, like the Blake Archive. Was created in the 1990s, accessible through the World Wide Web, open to anybody, presenting literary works in a way that people could not have encountered or with difficulties could encounter previously. Why? For example, because in the Blake Archive, you can check out all the different handmade editions of the of the poem The Tiger, created by William Blake. You can find also in this archive a kind of a large corpus of scholarly material too. And plus, you could navigate without a hierarchical order in this archive. So there is no prescribed order of accessibility or route towards the different editions and different works by William Blake. This is the time when a new database came into being, and that is the databases that contained searchable texts, called textabases. Now, after the history of digital humanities, let us see how digital humanities, this old and still emerging field, has been conceptualized. Now, conceptualization is related to naming and the history of the naming of this emerging field. John Unsworth, in the Blackwell Companion to Digital Humanities, writes this. The real origin of the term digital humanities was in a conversation with Andrew McNeely, the original acquiring editor for the Blackwell Companion to Digital Humanities. We started talking with him about that book project in 2001, in April. And by the end of November, we lined up contributors and were discussing the title for the contract. Ray Siemens, wanted a companion to humanities computing, as that was the term commonly used at that point. The editorial and marketing folks at Blackwell wanted companion to digitized humanities, and I suggested companion to digital humanities to shift the emphasis away from simple digitization. So 2001, there were 3 competing names for the emerging discipline that was supposed to materialize in a companion. humanities computing, as Ray Siemens' idea. The editorial and marketing people wanted digitized humanities, and Unsworth claims that he wanted to have digital humanities to shift the emphasis away from simple digitization. So what he wanted to communicate through the very name is that it is not just digitization at stake, that is, translating analog signs into digits, but rather a much larger field where humanities activities arrive at and occupy the digital arena. Brett Bobley, another famous digital humanist, writes in an email to me. This is a quotation by Matthew Kirschbaum. So this is his narrative. In an email to me, Brett Bobley describes a January 2006 lunch with another staffer at which they were brainstorming ideas for what would become the Digital Humanities Initiative. At the lunch, I jotted down a bunch of names, including humanities computing, e-humanities, and digital humanities. So again, 3 candidates: humanities computing, e-humanities, and digital humanities. This is the end of quotation. I'm going to continue the quotation, but right now I have to butt in with saying that e-humanities, the very term, was kind of fashionable back in the 90s and early 21st century. It was a kind of a reference to the electronic sign and the electronic version of everything, like the name of email, e-humanities. Now let me continue the quotation. When I got back to the office, I Googled all 3 of them, and digital humanities, this is 2006, digital humanities seemed to be the winner. I liked it for a few reasons. Due to 8.0 and their annual Digital Humanities Conference, the name brought up a lot of relevant hits. It was Digital Humanities was already there in the digital space, in the cyberspace, and Google could find it, and people and activities could be linked. More people and activities could be linked to this name than to the other ones. I believe I also heard from Julia Flanders about the forthcoming Digital Humanities Quarterly, a journal. I also appreciated the fact that it seemed to cast a wider net than humanities computing, which seemed to imply a form of computing, whereas digital humanities implied a form of humanism. I also thought it would be an easier sell to the humanities community to have the emphasis on the humanities. So what I think is very important from the perspective of conceptualizing the discipline through baptizing it, besides the ephemeral ideas of selling and marketing, is that that digital humanities seems to be a discipline that involves more types of approaches, activities, theoretical considerations than humanities computing, because humanities computing implies that this is a form of computing, a type of computing. The emphasis is on computing and not on humanities. Computing is qualified by humanities. And I have to agree with Brad Bobley that this would be misleading. This would have been misleading because the emphasis should be on the type of humanism. So it's not that humanities disappears as it was practiced later on, but humanities remains, and a new perspective, a type of qualification is added to its name. It's a form of humanities. What we can read in Wikipedia is this: digital humanities is an area of research and teaching at the intersection of computing and the disciplines of the humanities. So it is an area of research and teaching, so it has reverberations both in research and teaching and education, as the intersection of computing and humanities disciplines. The quotation goes on, developing from the fields of humanities computing, humanistic computing, and digital humanities praxis. Digital humanities embraces a variety of topics, from curating online collections to data mining large cultural data sets. So it evolved from humanities computing when humanists started using computers, or a way of computing that helps humanities research. Digital humanities, however, embraces a variety of topics, so it's not like a literary theory, okay? It embraces a variety of topics, from curating online collections, so very, in a sense, mundane digital activities, curating online collections. This is not an easy thing, I'm sorry to say that, but not so much a theory-oriented activity, to data mining large cultural data sets. So variety of topics, from digital exhibitions to exploring larger cultural phenomena, trends through mining, data mining, huge corpora. The quotation goes on, digital humanities, often abbreviated DH, sometimes it is even called, or nowadays it is rather called DH, by the initiate, of course, currently incorporates both digitized and born digital materials and combines the methodologies from traditional humanities disciplines such as history, philosophy, linguistics, literature, art, archaeology, music, and cultural studies, and social sciences with tools provided by computing such as data visualization, information retrieval, data mining, statistics, text mining, digital mapping, and digital publishing. So it's also there is also a fascinating, according to this definition, there is also a fascinating merging of methodologies which were always kept apart and developed separately, that is humanities and social sciences. And also digital publication is part of the agenda of digital humanities. Stephen Ramsey at an MLA conference came up with the idea concerning digital humanities, and he intended to create a tighter definition of digital humanities. He says that those people are not digital humanists who just use blogs, who collaborate with other scholars, who tweet every now and then, or use text analysis tools. He says that the people who are in digital humanities are the people who can build tools instead of just using it. Of course, Ramsey's claim became a target of all sorts of attacks and debates. And to my reading, one of the nicest and best responses to this exclusive definition was that of Mark Sampler, who argued that the distinguishing feature of digital humanities is its insistence on caring and sharing. So far, humanists worked against each other, and now with the help of digital humanities, humanists have to start collaborating more and more for the sake of beneficial results. Another very interesting method of conceptualizing digital humanities can be found in Adeline Coe's definition. She writes that this focus on methodology is important because throughout the majority of humanities computing projects, the social, political, and economic underpinnings, effects, and consequences of methodology are rarely examined. Too many in this field prize method without excavating the theoretical underpinnings and social consequences of method. In other words, humanities computing has focused on using computational tools to further humanities research and not to study the effects of computation as a humanities question. So, Adeline Coe, again a star in DH, claims that the difference between digital humanities and humanities computing is or can be captured lies in reflection. Humanities computing means that computers are used to explore questions, problems within humanities, whereas digital humanities does not only focus on these achievements, but also they would like to ferret out, dig deep into the use of the computer within humanities, to reflect on all sorts of theoretical assumptions, on theoretical underpinnings that humanities computing was not concerned with. So this theoretical reflection is at the focus of the work of digital humanists on the one hand, and on the other hand, it is a digital humanist who would explore the effect, the cultural effect of digitalization in culture. Alan Liu, another star in DH, also emphasizes this critical aspect of digital humanities in his article, Where is Cultural Criticism in DH? He writes, only by creating a methodological infrastructure in which culturally aware technology complements technologically aware cultural criticism can the digital humanities more effectively serve humanists by augmenting their ability to engage today's global scale cultural issues. So he claims that digital humanities should include two types of awarenesses, to put it like that: technological awareness, that is awareness of what is going on in technology in terms of culture, and also the cultural criticism of this technology. And that is awareness, criticism in terms of technology and in terms of cultural criticism, and the combination of these two may give an advantage to digital humanities. This is how they can complement, help traditional humanities activities, accounting for what is going on in the digitized and digitalized world. Now, what kind of activities can we associate with digital humanists? This is another approach, I guess. On the one hand, one can conceptually grasp an emerging and a field of interest, while it is also interesting to see the activities of digital humanities for the sake of conceptualizing what they are doing. So what kind of? On the one hand, going back to Stephen Ramsey's definition, they have to build. So a technological awareness, coding is part of the agenda of digital humanities. And also cooperation, as Mark Sampler put it earlier. What characterizes the activities of digital humanists are the following: interdisciplinarity, social and humanities computing, and even without humanities, a variety of disciplines can be brought together to work on a project. For example, there is an exploration of dreams. Psychologists, sociologists, literary people, linguistic people, and also computational IT people can work together. And in a sense, in a digital humanities a project, these people come together, and consequently, they have to work together. Also, digital humanists try to find ways of sharing their knowledge, their results with the rest of the world. Publishing an article is the traditional method, and it's very good, peer review, awesome. But at the same time, it is very slow. So sometimes it takes a long period of time, from 6 months to a year, to see your article published in peer-reviewed article. But the methodology of blogging very much in handy for sharing information fast and in a reliable manner. So academic blogging, while in Hungary it is not that widespread, in the Anglo-American world is. An interest in accessibility, that is open access, is part of the agenda of digital humanities. What and how should be accessed, who is supposed to pay, and how for the results. Also, there is a very keen interest towards digital textuality, that is what we can do with a text. What else can we do with a text? How else can we make sense of a text if it is digital? Not only digitized, but digital. We're going to see the difference later on. And also digital memory institutions and individuals can contribute to memory, human cultural memory. So digital memory is also at the core of interest in for digital humanities, and of course humanists, and also the access to these memories. Now, what kind of tools they might be using nowadays? As I mentioned, blogs. There are three types of blogs. the traditional ones, for example, WordPress, Blogspot. I have my blog in Blogspot, but I also run other blogs on WordPress, on the WordPress platform. For example, the English Department magazine Edzine is on WordPress. Also, the Hungarian Shakespeare Committee's web presence is located in WordPress. These are the platforms for traditional blogs where blog posts may run to almost 1,000 words. So these are long textual types of blogs. Whereas the other end is microblog platforms like Twitter, which is a tool, an amazing tool to share information very much. Originally, a Twitter post could contain only 140 words, whereas in nowadays it's doubled, so 280 words are there. So this is enough for references to very short notes, but it is instantaneous, very fast. You can learn many things about things in life with respect to Twitter and digital humanities. Of course, I learned about digital humanities much from Twitter, about Shakespeare too, because of this fast exchange of information that takes place via the microblog Twitter. Now, in between the traditional and the microblog, we have the visually interesting Tumblr, which is the platform Tumblr, which is a mesoblog, where the textual parts of the blog are much shorter. There is no limit, but they are shorter as a rule of the thumb, and more visual, so more pictures, much easier to make the blog post visually appealing. When you want to follow a blog, a traditional blog, you can use an application that helps you reading the new blog posts that have been posted at the blogs that you follow. For example, Feedly is a very good application for that. I myself use it for reading the blogs that I'm interested in. As I said, collaboration is very important for digital humanities. You can use writing tools like Google Drive. We are going to use Google Drive at this course. The Write LaTeX is also a collaboration tool. You can create bibliographies through Zotero. I use Zotero. In a later lecture, I'm going to talk about Zotero, but I suggest you just check it out, and it's a very useful application. For presentation, Prezi, or again, Google Drive is very good. People can work on the same presentation together. And also exhibition platforms like Omeka or Movio. All of this, I'm going to have a lecture on Omeka and Movio later on. So exhibition platforms are very important. And now today, then, I talked about two topics. I introduced the series of lectures, digitalization and literature. I talked about the assumptions and the topics I'm going to mention, and then I moved on to the exploration of an emerging and more important discipline, digital humanities. I talked about the history of digital humanities, its evolution, by the time it got its name, and when in the second decade of the 21st century, conceptualization was on its way. And then I talked about digital humanities with respect to its activities and the tools that might help people carry out these activities. And now what remains is thanking for your attention, and see you in the next video. Goodbye.